And we are live. Greetings, friends of the apocalypse. Welcome to podcast at Ground Zero, episode 62, Warday. I am the apocalypse nerd. He is Adam Bomb Glancy. I'm a little flustered because, again, we've had some kind of technical problems to start, as usual. You know, we go away for a little while and everything fucking breaks on us. You know, like my better headphones broke. Hangouts is getting weird. They're changing it. They're going to monetize it and make it for businesses. So in the future, we may not be doing the podcast this way. We're going to have to find a new way to do it. So yay for us.
Well, you didn't think things were going to go smoothly in the apocalypse, did you? I mean, we were kind of asking for it by picking this topic.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just kind of asking for it by just doing what we do, you know? So
you were asking for it by getting out of bed. You could have stayed in bed. You could have just stayed in bed and pulled the covers over your head. That'd work.
Yeah, I probably just should have, because it would have worked out better for me. But yeah, I don't know.
I think there's going to be a point where Nancy just stops bringing you food in bed and you have to get up. I think eventually that's just a given. So, what have we got going on in the news of the apocalypse? What do we have?
Okay, well, as you'll see, the background here, my move apocalypse happened, and we moved. So the bunker's now located in a new place. Little bit new backgrounds, but the folks can now see my Mad Max signs a little bit better in the background there. And then if you see back in the corner there, that shelf. Let's see here. That shelf here is all Gamma World, and that first. Third is all Gamma World. That's my Gamma World collection right there, folks. I'm not playing.
I do see a copy of Mall of America up there, lurking on one of the shelves.
Oh yes, everybody's favorite, Mall of America. Well, it's a really poorly produced game, but I like the game. So
yeah.
Yeah. And again, I could maybe I could take the camera off to. Maybe I could show folks the wall.
Watch out for the helicopter. Oh, no, it's a fan.
Yeah, it's a fan. I'll show them the wall of the apocalypse.
Saigon. Why did it have to be Saigon?
It's backwards because I can't flip anything anymore because they removed the goddamn feature to our Google Plus. But you can see here I've added to the wall of the apocalypse. I got a couple more Gamma World Second Edition cover there, Legion of Gold, my Gamma World poster, Thundar, the map, Metamorphosis Alpha there. So we are totally.
It's so beautiful.
It's mutant down here. You can see back up there the Mini Nuke and Pip Boy is up there. It's a lot of focus, but it's a little far away. But it's up there. So, like I said, we don't. Now it's out of focus. Let me get that in focus. We don't pretend here at Podcast at Ground Zero. We are definitely into the subject matter.
We nerd all the nerding. Yes, we do. I wish I could turn my camera and show you the bookcases over here. That this behind me is all like history. The bookcases over there are all post-apocalypse and Gamma World and Twilight 2000 and things like that. But anyways, moving right along.
I see. One thing I got for Christmas was there's the new, and I posted about it, was the new Metro 2035 has come out, the third book in the series. So I got that, and again, everything's probably looking backwards because I can't switch everything around. Also, I got, so that's something I'm going to be reading. We'll talk about that. Also, I got for Christmas was this here is a schematic for the Titan II missile. So when I was at the silo, my wife behind my back picked this up and got it for me. So I'm going to eventually get this somehow displayed. I got the full schematic of a Titan II missile here. What else I saw? There's a new post-apocalyptic book that I saw. It's a series of books, and they are like lighthearted apocalypse. And I did get the one, and it's by Benjamin Wallace. It's called Post-Apocalyptic Nomadic Warriors: A Duck and Cover Adventure. Is the name of the series. And there's the.
It sounds like they're seriously. Well, okay. Let me shut up so you can show the cover.
The colors are a little off because it's a screen on a screen, but it's really colorful. It's just you can't see it on there. So I don't have a hard copy of it. They had like the PDF the ebooks on sale for like $2.99 for the Kindle, so I picked one up. So I've read like a dozen pages or so, and it's very tongue in cheek. Like
is it seriously pushing that 80s apocalypse?
Oh yeah, this guy like is a nomadic warrior. He comes in, they're like, "What's your?" He's like, "Well, I come here because things happen, and I show up and I take it." It is so tongue in cheek. It's like I don't know how bad it is, but I'm gonna read through that and see how that is. And then also
we're both working on Shift.
Yeah, we're both working on Shift. So we're gonna review. We're going to review that as well once we're through with that, and then we have a bunch of post-apocalyptic books going to be coming our way from our friend Stephen Lee from 77 Lost Worlds, who we had on the podcast. They have a bunch of collections of anthologies for the lunar portion of the game, plus I think it's called the I can't forget what it's called, the ravaged Earth or devastated Earth. Like, sorry, Stephen. They have those books, and plus like the deep space. So it's like a whole bunch of apocalyptic stuff coming. So we're gonna. I promise we're gonna try to be good boys about that. Actually read the stuff people are sending us, and then review it. So that is my resolution for 2017 is to read shit people give me. So we're gonna. So we got that coming, and I saw there's a bunch of, one of my favorite sites, Quiet Earth. I don't know if you're familiar with that site.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, have you seen that? Ever seen that site, Quiet Earth?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
There's a bunch of like apocalyptic stuff, movies coming out. Like I just saw this one that's coming out. It's a zombie film. Let me just look that up real quick here. I didn't have it in front of me. Google. Looking it up here, folks. It's quietearth.us. There is. Oh, did you see the trailer for the Roger Corman Death Race 2050?
Yes, I did. It looks like they are. Well, they're going to do it, and I gotta admit, I did not see the Death Race movie that came out a while back, and there's been like 2 or 3 sequels. For some reason, they held no interest for me. But see Roger do it again. I will give Roger a chance. I will give Roger a shot.
I will definitely take a gander at his dystopian future. For sure. But there is a movie coming out. God, where I'm trying to find it now.
Is it a zombie film?
It's a zombie film.
Well, there's Train to Busan, right? Which is the Korean one.
That's one I was going to mention too, Train to Busan. Because even though the zombie genre has got so worn out now, but Train to Busan looks good.
Yeah. And the other one you're thinking of, I think, is the British one called The Girl with All the Talents.
Well, there is that, Girl with All the Talents. But there's another little one coming out called Dead Shack. There was a Kickstarter for it, which I missed because it ended a couple days ago. It's little kids versus zombies. And
all right.
And one of those kids, I believe, is one of the main characters from Stranger Things.
Okay.
It is.
Okay.
It is. I believe it's the main one. The one that had I can't remember his name because it's been a while since we watched it. The one who had, that Eleven stayed at his house and he started.
Yeah. He was the dungeon master.
He was a dungeon master.
He was the guy who ran the games for the other kids.
Yep, I believe he's in it, and it's called Dead Shack, and it's got them they're covered in tape and cardboard in the trailer, and like football helmets, and they're fighting over. It's a dark comedy, but it looks amusing because like the one is like, I want this one. It's like, you got a shield already. What better, you know? And it's just like, oh, you get all the cool weapons. It's like, you have the gun. You know, it's like it's
okay. Standard kids arguing, standard group of player characters in a role playing game arguing over the loot. You know, okay.
They're kids and they're fighting zombies. So
we can give that a try.
Yeah, well, I think they're getting the Kickstarter to raise money so they could finish it up. Like they're trying to do as much practical effects as possible, but they need to do some digital stuff, of course. But it's something to keep an eye out for. I'm eventually gonna post blog post for all this kind of crap, you know. So yeah, that's some of the stuff I've been seeing that's going to be coming out.
Yeah, certainly the Train to Busan and the Girl with All the Talents both looked like not the standard zombie movie. And at least with the Train to Busan, even if it is sort of the standard zombie movie,
it's on a train.
They did some things that I was very happy to see in a zombie movie. Just little tiny little elements. One of the best was that thing where the big glass wall in the train station collapses under the weight of the zombies.
And they just all start pouring through.
They just boom, and I was just like, yeah. Because unlike the rest of us, zombies aren't going to care if they get stuck in a crush. Like, what was it, that Who concert in Cincinnati, you know, where people got crushed. Zeke's not going to care. He's just not. He's just going to get compressed and compressed until whatever it is gives way under the weight of the mass, and then they're in.
And then the one guy in the trailer, like they're about to try to get to another car. You see him with like duct tape, like wrapping his forearms with tape. You know,
that's not the worst idea I've ever heard.
I saw that. I'm like, that's awesome. That's again, it's those little details, you know.
Yeah.
So it's little details.
And it's also one of the things that I always think is why the zombie apocalypse, as portrayed in movies, is overhyped, because that's the problem with humans. We solve problems. Zeke doesn't solve problems. Zeke does one thing very well, but he just does one thing. So, you know, I tend to think that people will adapt very quickly, and Zeke will never adapt. You can pull the same trick on Zeke 1,000 times, and he'll fall for it every single time, depending on your zombie mythology. Yes, I know you can have cooler zombies with different stories, and zombies are only what the authors want them to be. You know, that's the problem with zombies. They're always something different depending on what point the author's trying to make about people. So, oh well. Speaking of the points that people are trying to make, that is at the heart of every post-apocalyptic story. It's always about what's the author trying to say about us as the human race. And hopefully we've hit on that when we've discussed some of the books that have come out. And certainly, to me, that was very much at the top of my mind, going back through our book of the day, Warday.
Warday.
Whitney Strieber and James Kanutka. And I got to tell you, Whitney is the same guy who's going to make a career out of telling everyone he got butt probed by aliens.
Oh, does he?
And writing lots. Oh, yeah. Don't you know Contact? Whitney Strieber's Contact. They made it into a Christopher Walken movie, and aliens stuck things in Christopher Walken's butt, and also apparently stuck things in Whitney Strieber's butt. But he made a lot of alien contact books after this in the 90s. Some of them, and it got very blurry whether he was writing fiction or fact. And he always, I believe he came down. So it's kind of funny that we're, you know, that this book came from a guy whose career after the Cold War was all about aliens. You know, it's like he switched threats. You know what I mean? He made this very cool book. They were talking about doing a sequel, but it never happened. And in fact, what it ended up being was Nature's End, which I also have up on my shelf, which isn't really the same kind of apocalypse, but it's sort of an environmental apocalypse in motion. The story is set during a world that is going south because of population and environmental pressures. One of the standout feature of that book is a worldwide cult / political party that is pushing for the idea that since the Earth can't support this population, everyone should voluntarily enter a program of a euthanasia lottery to decide who wins and who loses. Basically, distributing a bunch of pills that everyone's supposed to take at 0 hour, and 1/3 of them are poison. And we'll fix the environmental problems like that, because 1/3 of the population will drop dead. And this cult is getting more and more influence in that world. And it's sort of the linchpin of the whole story. But that's Nature's End. Let's talk about Warday. How did you consume Warday, Mr. Wallace?
Well, I came back to it, many years. I tried to read I have that same book that you showed. I tried to read that back when I was in high school, and I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. I could not do it. So I did the audiobook version of it, which made it a lot easier to consume. Thinking about it now, I think part of a lot of the problem I had was that there was so many pages upon pages of charts and statistics.
Oh, but that's nerd porn. There's maps. There's maps in the book showing the fallout patterns for North America. And let me just turn to those. Yeah. So I remember seeing this as a kid or in college. And there's like 3-4 more pages of maps of it. And just being, again, nerd porn. Maybe it was all that D&D. But you're right. It's filled with weird data tables of stats and analysis.
Which at the time I was really not interested in, And
it looks like, and it was designed to read like official documents.
Yes.
That was one of the things that was both interesting and problematic, is that the summary of effects induced by electromagnetic pulse in the October 1980 attack by the Soviet Union and their implications for recovery, declassified document from 28th of April, 1991. That's kind of cool as an artifact as an adult, but as a high school student, I understand why you wanted to get to the part where they machine gun the mutants.
Or just it was too dry for me at the time. I couldn't do it. Even like I think the only way I could get through that book even now is audiobook, because they kind of read through all that boring stuff. So it's like I could pay attention, but I don't have to pay 100% attention. And I could get through all the statistics,
And it is dry. It's not really as well written, as compellingly written as I want. I mean, it's a style like Studs Terkel's The Good War or Max Brooks's World War Z, but those books told more engaging stories. Studs Terkel's because it was real stories, and Brooks because he just forced the stories to be more entertaining. These are so dry. I mean, they are really dry stories.
Yeah.
And
well, because they're just basically on a fact-finding mission to try to compile information. So okay, let's tell people what the book is about. Warday. Okay.
Sure.
Warday. There is a limited nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia in October of 1988. Okay. In the books. Oh, and just so folks know, the book was written in 1984. We will give you the obligatory spoiler alert, but we're not going to give you every single detail about the book, but we're probably going to spoil a lot of stuff. So, user discretion is advised. So, October of '88, limited nuclear exchange initiated by the Russians, and they wound up hitting Texas. They wound up hitting New York, Washington, and the missile fields in like the North South Dakota area were the main areas that they hit. We'll go into some of the issues how much problem I have with some of this stuff. But so there's a limited nuclear exchange. We struck back. You know, they go into a lot in the book about how they totally underestimated the EMP effects and how they would initiate EMP effects, saying that systems were built to withstand X amount of electromagnetic pulse, but they wound up like doing like 5 times as much as anticipated. So like electronics were wiped out most all over the place. So and it tells the story of the main characters, kind of like what happened during the war, because they kind of talk about it. And then you fast forward 5 years, I believe, in the story, and basically New York is abandoned. There's San Antonio. Is it San Antonio?
San Antonio was the one that got nuked, and his reason for nuking it was, but let's not. It was not what I wouldn't have picked. That would not have been my target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely on the list. It was definitely on the list of normal targets, but for whatever reason, they picked that with a limited attack. Yeah,
instead of say Houston or someplace closer to oil production or strategic production.
Well, they also said that a lot of their stuff missed too. Like they were bombed New York, but there was no real direct hits in New York. They kind of
New York is all New York's a radiological
disaster,
hit, I think is what it was.
Well, there was blast effects, because of the proximity, but they did not get direct hits. They all like went onto the ocean. I think there was 3 missiles, and they were all like offshore. You know.
Yes, but magically the ones in the Dakotas.
Surgical.
Those were all bang on target.
Oh, yeah, they were precision strikes which wiped out our entire missile fields in North and South Dakota.
Yeah,
which I'm not buying.
Well, there's a number of problems with the book. That I don't think they handle the Navy thing very well.
My God.
I mean, the war takes 36 minutes supposedly, and there's actually a part where they're trying to, after the initial strikes, there's all that's happening is they're trying to shut the war down after the first strikes are done, and they still managed to destroy 90% of the United States Navy surface fleet.
Yeah, which they got into later in the book, explaining how basically, it's kind of like when you play Battleship and you put all your ships together to try to avoid the guy finding you, and you hope that he doesn't find you. It seems like in the book he was under the assumption that, all of our ships are going to be all bunched together, and you can just take them out with one nuke strike. I'm calling bullshit on that. I'm totally calling bullshit on that.
I'm gonna have to call bullshit on the fact that our military forces are widely dispersed to places around the world, like Western Europe. Western Europe apparently doesn't get its hair mussed at all, which is weird.
Well, because basically, and then also before we get into what happened there is during that time in 1988. This was before the Cold War had ended. Now, people will correct me if I'm wrong. During that time, it sounds like somebody's, I bet you it's Colin. He's probably telling me that I'm wrong on something. But, because that's what he does. We always, at that time, had bombers in the air during that Cold War period of time. I don't know how much we had, but wasn't it at least a wing was constantly in the air?
It's a couple of wings. It's a couple of wings in the air, at all times.
Constantly circling the globe.
Yeah.
So why didn't they do anything? And then what happened to them afterwards? He never talked about the Air Force and what happened to the Air Force, because it wasn't like they were all flying right around the United States, to be knocked
and
up
just
by EMP.
got all EMP'd out of the sky, maybe. But and also they never discussed the massive armies in Europe. Did they fight? Did they not fight? Was it over before they could fight? One of the things I remember that just stood out to me as a derp moment is he has this description of as they're describing what happened to the Soviet fleet. There's this interview with a Navy officer, and he's talking about the 8 Typhoon class, Soviet submarines in the Baltic never sortied or whatever, didn't do this or were destroyed. And my first thought was, and this is when I read it in the 90s, was like, typhoons in the Baltic? No. The Red Banner Northern Fleet never put their typhoons in the Baltic. It was that they were designed to operate under the Arctic ice. They were out of Murmansk, you know, and the White Sea. They were all up north, so they could operate under the Arctic ice cap for cover. They wouldn't bottle them up in the Baltic where they can't get out through, you know, NATO Denmark. That's somebody who never bothered to do all that much research. We're armchair war nerds. We are absolutely armchair war nerds, and we knew that. That kind of seems stupid to me. But the idea behind the book is there's like a short nuclear exchange, and now 5 years later, America's a third world toilet.
We're a third world toilet that is completely shattered and divided. You know, California's kind of its own little entity. Apparently, there's multiple other, you know, areas. We are basically
like the South, Dixie, that got missed by the nukes. Everything from Kentucky, Washington D.C. south, and Texas east avoided getting nuked. So it's very much separate from the rest of the country, the way California is.
Yeah. And basically, you know, it's a third world country, and we are completely at the mercy of the Japanese for help and the British, you know, who came around so gladly helped us. Now, part of the reason that we got, we'll get to the point of what the book is in a second, folks, but a lot of this is related because they're telling a lot of this information. Because basically the gist of the book, folks, is those two guys in the book decide to find out. They really want to know what happened and where the country is after this war. Because
the idea that 5 years later that nobody really knows the details of the war.
Yeah,
and they don't know what's happening in different parts of the country because there's no national news service, or there's no the news is controlled by foreign powers and also controlled by regional governments that sing a song that you don't know what's true and what's not. There's competing narratives, and so
there's so much rumor and innuendo, and people don't know what the hell's going on, and so they want to create a book to find out what happened to America afterwards. So they travel they're traveling throughout the country, going through the different areas. There's like, you know, there's just south, you know, there's bad areas in Texas, and the south of there is an area called, it's a Mexican state, Aztlan, which is basically the Mexican.
No, I thought the Aztlan Gambit it was one of the iffiest parts of the whole book.
The Hispanic Native American country they're making, and basically the Japanese are there helping them out, you know, trying to build agriculture and, you know.
And more importantly, ethnically cleanse all the honkies.
Yeah.
The idea that Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, Southern California, that those white populations would stand around letting a minority population ethnically cleanse them, that seems like the exact opposite of what would happen.
Yeah, because I
have a hard time buying that.
Yeah, we know modern attitudes about that area, and they weren't that much different back then. So
no, and as far as, you know, just to go straight tribalist politics, 1988, 1989, or when this was written, 1984, the minorities were smaller numbers than they are today. The demographics had not shifted like they have today with a rising Hispanic population. The idea that the Hispanic population is gonna pick on the Caucasian population just didn't make any sense to me, particularly doing it with Japanese.
Yeah.
Japanese connivance, like this is them getting us back for. That's another thing about the book, is it has certain 1980s ideas, and one of them is that the Japanese are out to get us. We had some Japano panic in the 1980s, you know, with their car industry and our car industry and their economy and our economy. And we kind of got a little stupid scared about the Japanese. And
Colin just said something funny. I agree.
Let's hear it.
He goes, luckily nobody in the South had weapons to defend themselves from the Reconquista. I can't say that. From
Reconquista?
Thank you. From the Reconquista, thank you, of Aslan.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think Colin is right there, because I think there are probably more firearms along that southern border of the country than
per square inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, per square inch, it's a little dense. You could probably walk from rifles from Tucson to El Paso.
Well, but he makes it seem like that everybody, and well, that aside, he makes it seem like that every single person in this entire country was some kind of shell-shocked, depressed, like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. We can't do anything. And they just fucking flop over and, let everybody walk all over.
Yeah, there's a lot of total surrender and total, shock.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
No. Yeah, for months. But the problem is the book is set 5 years in the future, and there are no emergent political parties. I mean, the first thing I imagine is that there's going to be some emergent force in America. Maybe it's nasty and fascistic and nationalistic, but there's going to be a let's get even with the world movement. If we took one on the chin, we would get ugly. Yeah, we might get ugly and crazy.
They just made it seem like everybody just went belly up.
Yeah.
That America, we deserve this. Just give us everything that we deserve because we were such bad. It seems like that was maybe the author's, bad feelings about how we treat everybody else. Like, okay, we are getting what we deserve, and belly up, going belly up,
Yeah. Well, there's a number of weird things about his dissection of this nuclear war, and some of the stuff he gets, some of his stats and his radiation totals are interesting. I find it weird that he has to throw in a mystery plague at one point called the Cincinnati flu to knock out some more people. I personally think that post-nuclear strike, one of the things that I loved about, I want to say it was Tom Mulkey was writing about it in Twilight 2000 in Urban Guerrilla about Florida. He started talking about the number of casualties in Florida related to just regular healthcare going away.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that too. How there'd be such a huge drop-off death of population just because people can't get their meds or treatments anymore,
Yeah, huge die-off in the elderly, a huge die-off in the young, in the very young. Both ends of that scale would just crash precipitously. And certainly that should have happened post his nuclear war. But at the same time, so I don't think it was necessary to introduce the idea of a plague that may or may not.
Yeah, the Cincinnati flu.
May or may not have been. Yeah. I don't think that was necessary to further depopulate the continent, because he dropped a bunch of nukes and dropped a bunch of fallout in the wheat belt. I imagine that, and he's got a lot of good famine numbers. He's not joking about the famine.
Yeah.
They knock about 1/3 of the population out of the United States between the nukes, the famine, the radiological deaths, but and there should have been plenty of diseases. I don't fault him on that. And there have been, but a special disease seemed unnecessary. But all right.
The I can't remember what the hell it was called, but it was some new weird thing that you got. I've forgotten already. It's like, you got such and such. But and then part of the problem too is with everything is how everything happened was basically, what was it? France, England, and somebody else all in NATO made a pact. They said that secretly made
Germany.
Made a secret pact with the Russians, saying, "Hey, you know what? If you want to go fuck up the Americans, you could go have them. Just leave us alone. We won't interfere." Which is a big fuck you to us.
And also suicidal, because if the Russians did get rid of us, I I'm not sure how you keep all those tank divisions out of downtown Paris, but
Yeah, because as we know, the Russians had a lot of. They had a lot of tanks.
Yeah,
they had a lot of everything,
and not a lot to use them on except Western Europe. It's not like they're going to drive their tanks across the Pacific and invade California, or 5 whole army groups across the Bering Strait, like they said in Red Dawn. And I'm always like, really? Which freeway did you drive those 5 army groups across Alaska on? Because that's a long way to drive tanks on no roads.
Yeah,
no infrastructure in Alaska.
They had to be all transported, So
yeah,
he gets a lot of shit wrong, and I think that now like after the war, like we're because basically it's kind of like imperial colonization again with Britain, kind of taking over, like we're their new India, they're like, we're gonna give you aid, we're gonna help you out, but we're gonna take over everything,
Yeah, what's left of the U.S. Navy is reincorporated into the Royal Navy. So suddenly Britannia rules the waves again with the leftover American fleet at its disposal. Yeah, and I'm just like,
because apparently there wasn't that much of our fleet left. But it's like, again, we called bullshit on how they took out almost our entire fleet. There'd be more left, and especially back then, didn't we have, and still have, the most largest fleet in the world?
Yeah, well, exactly. Still do at the moment, I think.
Even though we've downsized, I don't think our whole fucking fleet would be taken out like in this book, and I don't think they would roll over to. Despite the whole thing about, they don't have orders, this and that, I'm sure they weren't just going to take that laying down,
Well, the idea that the British are going to offer us aid, all right, in exchange for, say they want to, part I think it was like lend-lease in reverse. We'll give you aid, but you're going to have to turn over, what's left of the fleet for one thing. And they started, sort of having rights to extract resources and things like that in exchange for other kinds of aid. And I'm thinking, what aid are they talking about exactly? I mean, would it be those giant wheat fields of Manchester? They're going to feed everybody in the Midwest because our wheat fields are irradiated. I mean, same thing with Japan. Oh, Japan's going to come in and has very much colonized California, where there's signs up in Japanese and American now, and at the same time, and it's all very Blade Runner looking out there with the Japanese and Asian and cultures mixed. But I'm like, Japan can't feed itself. So where's this aid coming from exactly? I mean, if you wanted to tell me that Argentina or Australia or Canada is feeding us, that makes much more. That makes a lot more sense.
The Japanese have moved into Astaland and have been trying to get crops growing in soy, to try to bring back, to feed, and they're giving us
in Arizona, in New Mexico.
And they're giving us radios and TVs again, and trying to have a normal life, because everybody's just like, okay, and more.
As long as we got television, we're happy if we have television and video games, because that's America.
And then what was the like all the scientists?
They're extracting scientists from America. Like the Japanese own Los Alamos now, or it's jointly administered by the Japanese and the British, and they're picking over our scientists like we're Germany at the end of World War II, where half of them are going to Japan and half of them are going to England. And I don't know, man. His point of this book is to subject America to conditions where we would be a third world country, and I'm all in favor of that plan as a fictional exercise, but I think we both thought he was kind of sloppy in the way he created the conditions, right?
Yeah.
That he could have done it. He could have been sharper creating those conditions.
Because I think there would have been more retaliation, whether or not he says they called it off and people with the orders. Because I think you'd definitely have some people who are, fringe, and if this was happening, they're like, well, fuck this, because we had all these wings in the air still, and our entire subfleet, which carries a large portion of our nuclear arsenal, which they weren't just taking out, because they were, underground secret missions, for 6 months. We don't know where they are. They didn't just get all taken out with the big, nuking. So why weren't these guys eventually surfacing and being like, well, fuck this shit? They took us up, fuck them, I don't know.
One thing that was really missing, and they make the point that like the new capital of the United States is supposedly like in Los Angeles now, and it's powerless, and really regional powers, regional states are turning into their own governments almost,
like their own small countries,
Yeah, and I get I get the idea of sort of broken up. Diffusion of power, diffusion of authority to a certain extent. But at the same time, it's almost like it didn't break up small enough. Like if it's going to be breaking up like that, why is like the mayor of Seattle tells the governor in Olympia, go fuck yourself, King County doesn't need the rest of Seattle or whatever. Seattle doesn't need the rest of the state of Washington or
he was trying to say that
Spokane.
He was trying to see, have it like the country's broken up and there wasn't any unity because it was broken up to sections. But then also I think he had too much unity on the smaller scale, like you're saying, that I think it'll be more fractured, Yeah.
If it's gonna be that broken up, there's gonna be a lot. I would think that there'd be more fracturing, and that you would have, city states making their own agreements, with other parts of the world, maybe to get Argentinian beef or wheat from Saskatchewan and Manitoba or whatever. I want to say that during the court, they make the point that Canada took a massive hit because of the EMP, and Mexico is wrecked as well because of the EMP. But
and the famine and the Canadians are like of course super pissed at us and treat us like complete assholes. They're like, this is all your fault. We have radiation, EMP, and this and that, but we're just going to come in. And basically, like I said, the whole gist of this guy's book seems to be America is getting what it deserves. Here's our lesson. We're going to go belly up and just take it because we feel we deserve this. That's the impression I got from the book, which I don't think is 100% accurate. There are some interesting aspects of the book. I guess I'm traveling throughout the country, going to California, which was basically like, breaking into a country because they had like the strictest immigration and border laws.
California looks like England in Children of Men.
Yeah. Can't get in, unless you got the pass, you're out, and they travel throughout the whole country, seeing the different areas and getting people's attitudes to see, people like, oh, America's going to rise again. Again, lots of statistics and polls show this and polls show that, and asking people questions and going throughout the Midwest and how, people are triaged in the book, basically saying like, yeah, you got too much radiation. You're going to fucking die. We're not going to help you because you're just going to die anyway. It's a waste of resources, So those two guys in the book are triaged. They got such heavy doses during the war that they're going to die in a few years. They've been around for 5, but they're probably going to die in a few more years. So they're not getting any medical care because they won't give it to them, And because of people being triaged, there's a lot of rise in, with whether it's the British aid or with this now, they call them witches with basically, natural medicines has become very big, midwives, herbs, herbs and spices and this natural stuff has become very big because...
Did it strike you that maybe Stryber, now Stryber goes on to be a big writer on the subject of UFO contactee and abductee issues and sort of New Age stuff. And the idea that there's this giant boost in New Age faith after the bomb, that also smelled like his axe to grind.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, really? I'm pretty sure that every hotel in the country does not have a book of Wicca in it. I think Americans would go back to religion pretty hard after
and California did. California was pretty big on that.
But the rise in the sort of New Agey stuff felt like it was, a bit. I didn't quite buy that.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I could see the whole, the whole, not necessarily the witch doctor thing, but the local doctor, natural herbs, medicines. Because if you can't get anything else, I could see that coming around, because you got people who lived in the woods, people who live on farm. You got to like take care of yourselves and natural remedies. I could see a rise in that if you can't get regular medicine. But again, he took it a couple of steps further than that. Where it's like, oh, everything's all wicked now, and we'll use these crystals to heal you. But related to that, I was going to say that this whole huge movement of euthanasia has become an acceptable. It has become an acceptable medical practice now, because it's like, you know what, you're like, yeah, you're going to die anyway, so you want to go on your own terms, because you're dead, and we're not going to help you.
You know what that I mean? I just didn't realize. I didn't make the connection from that to the whole euthanasia thing in After Earth, or I'm suddenly forgotten the name of the other Whitney Strieber, James Kanutka.
Nature's End.
Nature's End. Yeah. I didn't really make that connection until now. Is that both of them? There was this. Maybe it's leftover from. Maybe it's just this trope left over from On the Beach. Maybe. That euthanasia is now your
only choice.
Your fashionable exit from a terrible world.
So that's become a big thing. But so he goes to the country. They see all this stuff, and the medicine, and people trying to make a living, and everybody's there's some areas that have pockets of trying to come back, some don't, and one of the bigger things in the book was the whole thing of how New York City, people are still living there, even though it's really irradiated, but a lot of it's become contaminated. But basically, New York has become basically a big salvaging location.
Yeah.
Like, and people are making a living of stripping out everything that's usable in the city: glass, chairs, tables, copper. It's like like I said, we go back to America's a third world country, and it's just a resource for the rest of the world to strip. And again, it's like his point is like, well, that's what we've been doing to everybody else, so we're getting what we deserve, kind of axe to grind that he has in this book.
Yeah. There's definitely some of that going on. And there's things I wanted to, I really wanted to like this book
more.
But it kept coming up with silly things like again, one of the things that seemed cool, but then it was so dumb, which was the sub-popping thing, where the British Navy's hunting Russian submarines that are still on station. 5 years later, there's some Russian Typhoon boat that is surfacing, raiding Alaskan coastal villages for food, and then staying on station to do what? Why haven't they launched their fucking missiles yet? Why didn't they launch them? Oh, I don't know, 4.5 years ago. But they're still on station, and I'm like, and commanded by who? A team of zombies run by some mad Cossack version of Captain Ahab? No boat. If they had said that was something that happened in the months after the war,
okay,
right? There's every navy in the world is hunting down and forcing every boomer to surrender, making them know the war is over and you have to disarm and you have to surrender. That makes sense, but years?
5 years.
No. 5
yeah,
years.
No, it's too much. Because, well, number one, they, because I don't think the Russian subs are that much better than ours when it comes to fuel. But these nuclear subs have to refuel like what, about every 6 months, or they if I remember. I mean, again, I could be wrong, but I think they're only good for like what, 6 months to a year at most.
Well, you're thinking of like
they can't run 5 years.
I think you're thinking. I don't think so. I think what you're thinking though about the 6 months is that's like how long a maximum cruise is
a mission
for the crew, for the water reclamation systems, for the carried food supply. I think maybe 6 months on station is like the outside number.
Yeah.
But but I don't think that. I think the fuel supply on a boat
2 years maybe.
Maybe, but I think I'm pulling numbers out of my.
Yeah, but it's not more than a couple. It's not 5 years. That I'm, you know, I'll swear on that one. Again, I don't think I'm wrong, but it's maybe I know it's only a couple of years, but they know that every so many years. I know from what I've seen, even our nuclear battleships, they have to be refueled every so many years. It's like 2 years, I want to say, give or take, you know, around there. So 5 years, you know, on the same fuel, they would have been dead in the water by now. I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah, they would have had to make a decision whether or not to launch.
Yeah,
that's presuming no contact, you know,
from they had
the command structure.
Well, they had some contact because the guy tells them the story. Hell, they had like a fleet of fucking ships to protect them, like, you know, attack subs and boats, and you know.
Yeah, it wasn't just a typhoon. It was like a typhoon with a couple of other boats,
escorts,
as escorts, which again sounds like him imagining that the typhoon's like a B-25 with a couple of P-40 P-51 Mustangs flying around an escort. That's not how boats. I don't think that's how boats operate, you know. But okay, that one I remember reading it years ago and being excited by the idea, and then, you know, when I first read it in college or whatever, and then later realizing, hey, you know, everyone. The one thing I always gave, you know, I was always when we hit the realm of techno thriller in the 80s, and you know, the age of the techno thriller came in with Clancy. I always appreciated him getting the technological details correct, because it was just one more way for me not to be jerked out of the story. Yeah. Through, yeah, have my, and certainly the lack of the lack of firearms in Warday seemed like one of the things. I don't remember that. I just don't remember the country bristling with firearms. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I would think
back. I mean, I don't think it was as heavily armed as it is now, but it was still pretty damn heavily armed. You know. And where's the National Guard? Where's the military? I mean, we have, you know, where's all this? There's so much.
Well, only in New York, apparently.
Yeah.
You know,
like everybody's like a new recruit in these areas, but it's like you would have had, you know, remnants of the military there. I mean, a lot of it was like, I think in the story, a lot of it was overseas, and they were going to give them safe, but it wasn't all over there. We had all, you know, they only hit like one big base. You know, they hit like, you know, near San Antonio, New York. You know, we have bases in Florida. We have bases in Georgia. We have bases here. We have bases there. We have bases everywhere. There's shit everywhere. You know.
Well, you know, also overseas is like, you know, what happened to places like Diego Garcia or Guam, or all those military facilities in Hawaii. Fuck, you know, or the Canal Zone, or, you know. There's a lot of stuff that is just shot right past, and just kind of moving right along. We need to get to the part where, you know, where the Japanese are carving up America. And again, I'm thinking post-nuclear war, where were the Japanese selling their cars again and all their products? Oh yeah, to us. They were selling them to us, and somehow having their entire market removed only results in Japan becoming an imperialist power again. I'm like, no, not so much. The Japanese would be scrambling to feed themselves post,
because especially back then, our grain fed a lot of the world.
Yeah, still does. And the idea of us going offline does not mean that everybody else suddenly has a great time. What it means is a bowl of rice just doubled in price.
Oh yeah,
you know, and that's gonna put a lot of people into empty stomachs.
Yeah, especially back then. I mean, nowadays, you know, our country could easily be crippled by like just China going, you know what? All this region where everything you own is made here, we're not doing that anymore, and we would be fucked because we have no infrastructure to make anything anymore. You know, so it's not like it was, you know. But back then we still had something left, you know, so that could happen. But back then, when again we were feeding everybody, you know, food would be a problem, huge problem for the world. You know, not that we fed everybody, you know, but there would be some huge problems, you know. because there's no exports of that. So
this is 1989 or 88. This is before Tiananmen Square. This is before the giant change in Chinese policy, where the Chinese went from having an economy the size of Norway or something to an economy that is suddenly the second largest economy in the world. I mean, the Chinese transformation since Tiananmen has been like the Japanese transformation since Perry showed up in 1868 and opened Japan up, and then suddenly it's 1905 and they're sinking the Russian fleet at Tsushima Straits using ironclad battleships, when 30 years before they were hitting each other with swords and shooting each other with muskets. The Chinese have had sort of a similar transformation of power. Stryber seems to just shoot right past the Chinese, like they're not even there.
Well, remember, he wrote the book in '84. So
yeah, where the Chinese are again not really, the people are sort of ignoring them. India feels like it's ignored when when India is such a huge part of the 21st century. India is kind of ignored as well. But it shows sort of, again, the big thing to me was it really showed certain 80s prejudices, particularly.
Oh yeah. Well, and he couldn't foresee the changes that we see now. So he was basing it on the world he was in,
and projecting the problem of today 5-10 years in the future. I just feel like the idea of Japan being a threat is it's one of those things that always struck me as a little ridiculous. Japan is just they're not the threat they were in the 30s, and the threat that they supposedly posed in the 80s wasn't much of a threat. I mean, they got rich, they made tiny radios, and they made good electronics, and they got pretty wealthy off of that. Their birth rate declined, like everybody does when they get successful.
But they made they made good trains. They made fast trains.
They made fast trains, but the idea that they were going to dominate America, there's a couple of ridiculous books and stuff in that from the 80s that posit the Japanese taking over. In fact, isn't there a Tom Clancy one where the Japanese kamikaze a 747 into a joint section of Congress as part of their evil plan to take over America or something? And it's not it's not good. But I don't know. The fear of the Japanese just struck me as weird when we have so many other marvelous things to be afraid of. I kind of remember the Iranians not getting any. Oh yeah, there's nothing mention.
He mentioned something about Israel at one point, but it was again very insignificant. That whole, especially back in the 80s, that whole area was a fucking hotbed.
Yeah, and awash in weapons and authoritarian regimes, spoiling for a fight. Heck, good old Saddam Hussein was above dirt in 1988. If the Russians and the Americans blow each other up in World War III, that either leaves him and the Iranians to sell each other's hash, or maybe he invades Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and nobody's got boo to say about it. Maybe you get that Gulf War, and who's going to push him out? The British, the French, they'd better. Maybe they can do it without our throw weight. But, maybe the last of American military power gets used settling some things around the world. That's another possibility that there's a series of books I read by an Australian author. They're not particularly great, but they were, it's called After America. And it's one of these things where
they have heard of that.
He destroys America through means that make no sense and are never explained. Basically, alien space bats. I mean, one day, some effect hits Earth from outer space that causes every animal in North America to drop dead. And suddenly, there's this big swath of North America, sort of shaped like a flashlight beam on a floor. Like a flashlight shined on the floor, and it was stretched sort of oval-shaped light beam. Everything in that area is wiped out. Huge chunks of Canada, big chunk of Mexico. It even reaches to Cuba and kills half of Cuba. And so America just drops dead one day. But our military is deployed around the world, right? So there's this mad scramble to get the American military back to America, both to get citizens back to the empty country and also, to get them out of harm's way. There's no point in the Gulf War. We got to go home now, pull out of Iraq, pull out of Afghanistan, that sort of thing. And at least he sort of covered that idea. You know what I mean? That if there's the idea that these resources and these people overseas don't vanish. You know?
Well, and in this book, they don't really go into that. Like, the only thing, there's some half-assed, lazy military around New York just kind of, overseeing the deconstruction of the whole city. And I've been thinking about this the whole time, how you talked about is, again, the lack of firearms in the country. Resistance, more people killing each other. It's like in the whole book, it's like,
it was left off of his list.
Nobody has any
guns. Was left off of his. Was left off of his casualties after the war. He doesn't list any casualties from civil disorder.
Oh yeah,
from people fighting over for the last can of beans on the block, and there would have been months of that.
Everything was just kumbaya. Like, he describes so many stories from people about, like, oh, we were traveling, we're in the hotel, and we all became a family, we hunkered down, and we helped each other out, and there was too much people just getting along. I'm not saying people wouldn't, because I think inherently people want to be good, but there's a lot of bad element out there, and there would be huge civil unrest, especially like, I need to feed my family, and I will kill you to feed my family, because there's nothing,
Yeah, and the book kind of glossed past a lot of that. And
why didn't more people have guns? There's so many guns in this country. Why aren't there more armed citizens at all?
Yeah, you think it'd look like the Wild West, where everybody's got a piece.
Because it wasn't like the military was there controlling it, or police, or National Guard. There's barely any presence. There's just a little bit of fucking paper fucking authority there. Like, oh, we're part of the border. We can't come to this country. You can't come here. There's not a whole lot of that. I think it would be a little more Wild Westish.
The other thing that also kind of got left out to me, was the idea of Americans attempting to emigrate. That is to say, American immigration back to Europe. Maybe Americans are abandoning North America to try and go back to Ireland, to go back to Scotland, Germany, Denmark, Norway, and join those places who didn't get nuked.
Well, apparently the only immigration was everybody's trying to get to California or, somewhere else in the country, maybe Canada,
Yes, because no one can get anywhere. I'm sorry. You'll notice how far the average Syrian refugee has gotten. They've gotten quite far. Yes, I know the Mediterranean is smaller, but they've gotten all the way here. They've gotten to Canada. They've gotten to, and maybe I'm overestimating they've gotten around the world while the world is still working. I haven't really factored in how badly transportation might be mauled by the EMP effects.
Oh yeah, but that's just here. Plenty of people would be, plenty of places else in the world could be flying in planes and this and that. I don't know, man. It's well, I think we said enough about the book.
Yeah,
it's not.
It's not as successful as we wanted it to be.
Yeah,
wanted it to be. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think our overall feelings is that I'd say it's an okay novel. Not the worst thing I've ever read, but it's not that great either.
It's aspirations, right? The aspirations of this book, to create a book that is like a historical document looking back over the changes in America that happened 5 years after a limited nuclear war. An oral history, just rather than going to academics, but to give an ant's eye view of what the world looks like, what it's like to get food, what it's like to get clean water, what it's like to get access to education or electricity or whatever.
Great idea.
That's a great idea. Great idea. And I just feel like you missed the boat.
Execution wasn't because he, like you said, he had a lot of axes to grind, and that kind of thing interfered with his ability to create a good story.
And some of that might be James Kanutka too, but you know, I'm blaming Whitney Strieber because he's the most famous one of the bunch, and he's also had more alien butt sex than James Kanutka, so he's going to get more of the blame.
Yeah, well, there's two people who wrote the book, so you know, and it's not like two people can't write a good book. You know, look at Lucifer's Hammer. You know, not a perfect story, but we love that. We love that book. You know, so
we love that one in spite of the axes that one has to grind, and that's got plenty of axes. Oh, yeah. Everybody's got one. I'm beginning to think that most post-apocalyptic fiction is about getting even with people you disagreed with before the bombs dropped. It's a lot of it is about how to I told you were wrong. Your political and economic philosophy has failed you. And I'm right, you know.
Oh yeah, that's like, you know, the nerds in high school trying to get back at the bullies who picked on them, and they're in school like, see, I'm bitter now, you know.
Well, that's why I have not picked up any of those Dies the Fire books, because it's just, oh my God, just again, revenge of the SCA.
I called it SCA porn once in a thing, and somebody like went on some kind of diatribe about how I was wrong, and real SCA porn wouldn't be like that. They wouldn't want the blah blah blah. It's like, dude, it's SCA porn because people are gonna get off guard and like, look, see, the world ended and our useless skills became useful. You know, that's what those books are about. I'm sorry, you know.
Well, and that's a lot of what it's about. You get a lot of like, see, I told you, stockpiling supplies equal to half our income, you know, was going to pay off in the end, you know, and it's about
knowing how to forge swords, because all of a sudden all combustion doesn't work in the world magically, you know.
That's another alien space bat thing. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I've been sort of turned off. Another reason I'm turned off by it is that it's alien space bat technology. It was one of the reasons that grumped me about Revolution. And I try as I might, I couldn't get into Revolution because it was alien space bat.
Once I found that was nanotechnology, I was like, you know.
Well, we went through a period in the 2000s where nanotechnology did everything. If you wanted it, it was the ultimate plot device. It was responsible for every hole in the plot, you know.
And we're not there yet to where nanotechnology. I mean, I don't think it's infeasible, you know, if nanotechnology ever develops the way they want it to be in another 100 to 200 years, you know, not now. But you know, and nanotechnology is a big thing in Shift. So
yeah.
But
all right, I will keep my eyes open on that.
Oh my God, yeah.
I've only just started Shift.
Spoiler alert, Scott. It's nanotechnology, but it's
yeah. You're not going to hurt my feelings with that.
Okay.
All right. So, bottom line, Warday is aspirationally a great idea. Execution, a bit muddled. Not the nerding out level of technical detail and sociological and economic and political detail I would have wanted. But then again, I'm the kind of guy who, when I played Twilight 2000, constantly, you know, rewrote the Twilight 2000 timeline and backstory to meet my own list of who was right and who was wrong and who's
well. That's a sign. That's a good sign of a good game master. You adapt it to its. You know, the rules are there to use the way you want. But yeah, the book, like I said, you know, and I think again, it's supposed to be, you know, like you said, ants eye view. It's a lot of documentation, official documentation. It's very dry, a lot of statistics. Like I said, I had trouble. I even have an ebook version of it and tried reading it again. I just couldn't do it. The only way I was able to get through this book was as an audiobook, because I'd be able to listen to it in the car when
passively, yeah.
Just you know, when I'd have hour, you know, I'd be like, you know, before I moved, you know, when I was commuting back and forth to work, because it's like, well, I got nothing else to do, and I could just kind of listen to it, because even just listening to those reams of statistics, it's just so like, oh my God, if I had to sit down and read this, I would fall asleep every single time, you know. Yeah. But again, not the worst book out there, you know. Again, like it's like Scott had said, the aspirations conceptually, I think it's a solid idea, and I think it really had a lot of potential. I just think it fell a little short, you know. Yeah. Is it worth a read?
If you enjoy being more right than the author, you'll have a ball.
Yeah. It's not something I would put high on my list of recommendations. There's a lot of books I would put first. You know, if you want to be a completist to try to read as much post-apocalyptic fiction from the 80s like we all do, then I'd say definitely put it on your list. But again, there's higher things on the list for sure out there. So you know, like it could be worse. You could be reading the Ashes series, you know, but you know, out of the ashes, into the ashes, besides the ashes, you know, over the ashes.
I really think he peaked with beside the ashes.
Besides the ashes.
That was probably the best one, and then it all kind of went downhill after that. Then he had Down the Street from the Ashes, Post Office Box of the Ashes. Yeah, it got a little lost. He lost touch with the ashes, Jared.
Yeah,
he lost touch with the ashes.
Anyway, so that's the book, folks. Again, it's not, like I said, it's not something I would rush out and read. You know, I mean, our last book review was Wool. I would pick that up well before I pick up.
Wool's just a more compelling story. You know, wanting to do
different kind of story. It's more of just a story, a fiction story, whereas this one, again, the story that it's trying to tell is different, you know.
Yeah.
But again, you know, some people might have liked Warday a lot more than us, and that's completely possible, because there's a lot of stuff that people like a lot more than you or I do, you know, there's a lot of things that we really like that people don't like, you know. So that, again, folks, this is just our take on it, you know, and our opinion on it. So take it as you will.
Yes, your mileage may vary.
Yes, mileage may vary. So, like I said, our mileage may vary. Like I said, I'm really excited about getting more into, like I said, that one book that I'm reading, the what the hell was it called? The Post-Apocalyptic Nomadic Warriors by Benjamin Wallace. I'll post something about that, because again, it's just, you know, total tongue-in-cheek apocalypse, you know. And you know what? I kind of look forward to reading something, because everything's always been like, oh, the apocalypse, and it's like this, you know, takes a lighthearted view of it. So I'm kind of curious to see how it pans out. He's got like four books out in that series. So
you know, I might throw up some of the other post-apocalypse stuff I've got up here on my bookshelf. I'm remembering there's an absurdist novel by Ron Goulart called After Things Fall Apart, and it's sort of a very just ridiculous satire, tongue-in-cheek, post-apocalyptic world. It's set in California, where California is filled with every ridiculous California fad and political, you know, reactionary and leftist, you know, granola eater has turned into a warlord, you know, controlling their 10 square blocks or their 2 blocks or maybe just a couple of floors of a high rise. And he sort of skewers California society, you know, with his novel or novella. These things are short. Some of these things are stunningly short compared to, you know, Warday, which is 515 pages long. So it is also not thin, which is perhaps another bar to entry on that.
Yeah, all right, it's a little dense. So
are we done?
So we are done, folks. So again, like we said, I think you've gauged what we think about it at this point. So not sure what our next topic's going to be. Maybe it'll be Shift. We'll see if I can get to that quickly, or maybe we'll do a movie. Not me and Scott will talk. One thing we may do a little bit differently, folks, for you who are watching it live now, is we started off with this whole idea of doing it on a consistent day and time, you know, so people could watch. And we were just talking about this, like, well, why do we have to do that? You know, and we don't think it's really necessary, because sometimes we run into conflicts.
Especially if Google Hangouts is going to be changing the way they do stuff. We may just pre-record.
You may just pre-record. We may have to do something a little bit different, folks. We may just, you know,
sorry, Colin.
Yeah.
Colin.
Sorry. So if the Google Hangouts changes enough to where we won't be able to utilize it anymore, then we're gonna have to do something like, you know, we'll still do a video just because people like to watch as well. We'll post on the channel. Like we'll have to do like a you may have to do a Skype, and I'll have to just record the video, which I could do on the computer, and then we'll just do it whenever, you know. But for now, even with the Google Plus Hangouts still being active, we may just do it whenever we feel we could do it. You know, like if me and Scott have some time, we may do it one afternoon on a Saturday. You know, so I think the consistent time of doing it may go away, just because I think we should just do it when we have some time. You know, because you know a lot of times Scott runs into conflicts, I run into conflicts, and that was always a lot of the times where we wound up pushing it out for weeks, because it's like we kept on running into a problem with that one day, this day and time that we had to do. You know, but if we could just do it anyway, like, hey, you free Saturday afternoon? Okay, good, let's do it. You know, so you may see some changes, but I promise you, we're still going to keep doing the show. We're still going to give you the same high quality content that we always give you. We just may do it in a little different format, but than how we're doing it now. But it's still going to come out there. And again, once I know what's going to be coming up, we will be sure to let you folks know. So
absolutely.
That being said, we are done. We want to thank you for being with us. I am Jared the Apocalypse, Nerd Wallace. He is Adam Bomb Glancy. We reviewed, I'll click on that so they can see it. We reviewed Warday. So again, do what you want with it. So, all right, folks, we will see you in the Wastelands. Thank you and good night.